Hello, get ready for a great episode because today we're doing a versus. Well, it's a yes and versus, which is psychological astrology as held down by John Foster and Hellenistic traditional teleological astrology by held down by me. And Jay-Z is like the referee, I guess.
Maybe I'll be the rabble rouser,
Okay.
or I'll be the peanut gallery.
Yeah, the one we'll be getting along so well is somebody's going to have to cause some controversy.
Oh yeah. Well, in a versus, you don't necessarily have to not get along. I mean, I think we can be noticing the similarities and differences of these different theories and enjoying the whole repartee. Is that the right word?
It sounds good to me. Like I said, okay,
All right.
shoot, girl.
All right. The first question is, how does psychological astrology look at fate and free will?
Okay, I cannot answer that question in general. I can only answer that question from my perspective. Okay, so I don't know how psychological astrology looks at it, but how I look at it is this. Number one, as we both know, we're both Christians here. So first of all, God rules. So he also, yes, exactly. And he gave us free will. I believe that he gave us free will. So I have always operated, even before I understood what that meant, as though I were in charge of my life. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not being deceived at times. And in fact, I'm not in charge of my life at those points, but I think I am and all that. But as a general rule, I believe that I am in charge of my life. So when I look at astrology in any of its variations, I look at it in the same way that I would look at the weatherman if I were going to go up to the mountain and I wanted to know what the weather was like going to be over another city. I would look at the report and I would gather that information, and then I would take that information and then I would make decisions upon it. I would not expect that that weatherman would tell me how my fate is going to be when I get to the other side of the mountain, because that all has to do with me. So it's kind of like that with the astrology. When I am with um, a client and I'm consulting, I am under no illusions that I know everything and can anticipate everything or can even correctly interpret everything, because we are so varied. Remember, our astrology is supposed to represent every single thing that happens in the entire universe to us. Okay. And the spectrum is wide. That's why there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books. And they say some things that are similar and some things that are different. Okay. So none of us knows what's the right or wrong. All we can do is try to bring the astrology in terms of where that person is at that time. So when I lead, it's like I fully expect that you're going to take this information and you're going to make some decisions about it and you're going to do something. So that's how I look at it. I prefer to look at it. Go ahead. I don't want to bogart the time.
So basically, you're kind of saying that the astrology is the weather forecast, and then we get to act within our free will in terms of that. I think a lot of people think Hellenistic astrology is extremely faded. At least that's all the hype around it is it's really faded, and Vedic found is really faded. And I think I would actually add on something here to say that astrology actually looks at a few different fates. There's like the natural fates. The fate is like if you have a water chart, you might be fated to have a belly. But if you have a super air chart, you might be kind of fated to be lanky. Oh yeah, I could show you mine. I'll be showing that at 4 o'clock. That's a different show though. But basically the point is there are kind of natural fates that the chart offers, which that doesn't mean that we don't have free will to work within those, but an air chart is lanky and an earth chart is thick, and that's we don't judge those necessarily as good or bad things like a lot of society does, but the astrologers would say that's just the natural design of that chart. And so in teleology, we look a lot at natural design. This person's designed to talk a lot. This person's designed to be really quiet. This person's designed to have a Mars in Aries and have a temper. And this person has Mars in Cancer and they have a less of a temper. So it's not that that's their fate, like they can't get out of it, but they are fated in as much as they are designed a certain way. And there's that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that part I agree with. Like, for example, if I wanted to be an NBA basketball player, well, I simply don't have the skills or all of the prerequisites for that. If I wanted to be a famous opera singer, I don't have the voice for that. I just don't. So I am fated not to be an opera singer. I am fated not to be an NBA basketball player. So I do have to learn what my lane is and then try to succeed within my lane, whatever that may be vocationally or however that works out. So I do agree with that. The other thing too is I want to say that I said my philosophy is to assume that I am in control and I can manage these things, but I'm under no illusion that there could be things that I don't understand anymore. I used to think I understood a lot of stuff. Now I know I don't understand nothing. Okay. I barely get by with what I know. I mean, if you looked at took all of the knowledge that I have astrology for 40 years of it, and you put it in a thimble, you might be able to fill it. Maybe. Okay. But the rest of it, no, there's too much that we don't know. I think the problem with astrologers is we assume we know too much and we don't. So
Well, go ahead.
I just want to say about the fate versus free will thing. I think what is I find helpful to think of it is instead of using those words, fate and free will, it's like predisposed versus predetermined. Because I think, yeah, you're not everything is not predetermined, but there are things that you're predisposed because of your chart to act in certain ways or have certain influences in your life or certain themes in your life, but how you act them out is up to you.
yeah, I think I can pretty much buy that too. I mean, if you have a strength in your chart, for example, if you have a grand trine in air, as an example, you are going to wind up having some skills in the air issues, right? Now, those skills could wind up, from a psychological standpoint, creating a problem. And that is when we have a grand trine, we tend to have these grooves, and it eventually becomes like a record. And all of a sudden, the record only plays within the groove. And now all of a sudden, you can't go out and reach out to anybody else. You're totally become superior almost to everybody else. You can even develop a superiority complex as a result of it. You have those tendencies. You have these great skills that you happen to have. However they came about, we happen to see them somehow, some way. The astrology mirrors these skills that a person has. I don't know how it happens. I don't think Uranus sat up there and said, you're going to have this particular skill set that is Uranian. I don't personally think that way. Some people do. Some people, I've heard them. I woke up last night in the middle of a dream. Uranus talked to me, and okay, so I've never had Uranus talk to me, even though I have Uranus on my ascendant. I'm missing out somewhere. But that's probably because I wouldn't have listened anyways, because that is my nature. That's my inclination, to go with what JC says. So a lot of it obviously has to do with that. When we do psychological astrology based on the way I was taught with Noel, we go back and figure out what all of those underlying patterns were, not all of them, but the major ones from when they were growing up that became the lane that they decided to go in. Okay, because sometimes the lane you decide to go in is not the right lane. You get off the main highway and all of a sudden you're on a side one, and it takes you 20 years to get back on the highway that you should have been on 20 years ago. And so we can see those things mirrored in somebody's life without the astrology causing it. The person made the decision, or decisions, a series of decisions to keep themselves off of that road. But nonetheless, the astrology did sort of tell us, you know what, there is a road. So I guess that's kind of like fate in a way, but it shows you how we can deviate from maybe what our disposed way should have been to something that was not as efficient.
Well, okay, so in modern, because I think astrology, at least teleological astrology, is manifestation theory. And in manifestation theory, there's this idea that whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve. Like if you vision, I'm an Olympic athlete, I'm Olympic, you'll make that happen. But what astrology knows is that not every chart can vision and manifest everything. Like you're saying, you're not the chart of an opera singer, so you wouldn't manifest that successfully. But what it does say is that every chart can be good at something what it is built for. And so it's a little bit of a tweak from this general manifestation theory to say, like, let's manifest what the soul census machine is built for.
I
I
I have to say that
go ahead, sorry.
I have a grand shrine, and I am built for having a superiority complex.
You totally have that. That's why we get along, is because I'm a bigger narcissist than you. I'm just kidding. See how I was
It's
narcissistic about
funny.
being a narcissist?
See how competitive you are about who's the most competitive?
Sorry, John. Sorry, we digress.
That's okay. I'm loving it. It's funny how sometimes these examples we throw out wind up being hitting on the other person who's there, and we have no idea how it happened, but it does. So it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, while I was studying astrology years ago, but not seriously, I also was really big into Napoleon Hill and all of those kinds of things. I was big into the self-improvement industry. So I raised myself on the idea that if I can see it and I can believe it, damn it, I can achieve it. You know, that kind of a mindset. But it's like you said, it's true up to a point. Okay, I can't take it even infiltrated the church and became the god the I forget the word that they use, but it became its own gospel of a prosperity gospel, and it embedded in the church and made people think that if you just do this or that, you're going to become rich. And then you would say, well, can you take that over to Africa and have that philosophy work over in Africa? Well, if they really believe in achieve, really, where's the opportunity for them to believe and achieve? Because if
Mm.
you don't have opportunity in order to allow what you want to have manifest, it's not going to happen. You can sit there in your house all day long and dream and manifest and whatever it is that you want to do. But if you don't have the opportunity to put it into a place where it can be achieved, there's not likely that's going to happen.
Ooh,
So it's another one, and it's the same thing with astrology. Let me give you an example. How about some of the famous painters, Grandma Moses, for example? She lived in an age when women did not paint. Women didn't do anything other than cook and do all their things. Something happened to her, and I forget at age 80 or so, she decided she was going to paint, and then now she's back after all of that diversion. She's back into her lane. And now all of a sudden she becomes one of the most famous painters of her time at that time with such a little teeny narrow period. It makes you wonder what would have happened if she had had the other 60 or 70 years prior to that. But so you need the opportunity. You need the environment to cooperate with you. And it doesn't always cooperate.
So Hellenistic astrology looks at this, at least Claudius Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos. He said there's 4 influences on a growing creature: genetics, culture, climate, and the chart. So the chart is growing, and we look at that layer. What are the fates here? But then the culture where it's growing, like you're saying, if that chart's growing in Africa, it has a certain set of, and that's a shout out for the culture and astrology show that we do on Wednesdays. That's where we delve all into that cultural layer and how it interfaces with the chart. But I think that's absolutely, it influences the fate of a plant that's growing, or a human in this case. They saw humans as roving plants essentially. And so yeah, I think that's one point. Now I want to say one other thing, which is there's also a certain kind of fate called Moira, which is the fates we're here to partake in. And it's also the word for the degree in a chart. So like if your sun's at 5 Cancer, you have a Moira of 5 Cancer. And what that means is when any transit hits 5 Cancer, you're here to partake in the fates of your 5th degree, which means it's time for you to cook a meal, or it's time for you to make a craft, or love on some kittens, or whatever a Cancer sun would do. So that our chart is actually fates we are here to express. So it's not just fates that happen to us, but it's like the fatedness of our expression is in there too.
I think I can buy that up to a point. My if I were to argue a little bit, it would only be on the I don't know how much of things are that predestined versus how much things develop. There's no doubt there's a genetic component. Okay, I mean we see that. In fact, if in the olden days, back 1,000, 2,000 years ago, if they would have understand a little bit of genetics, they wouldn't have been so keen on bringing the men into all their damn business. The fathers would have realized a lot of times the genes go cross generational and cross from male to female and vice versa. So it would have been better for them to bring their daughters into the business than it was to bring their sons, as an example. But they didn't. They got stuck within, and that's the cultural societal thing that you always have to be aware of. This is one of the things also that Noel taught us to be big on. We have to understand the culture that the astrology is working in, that the person is working in. I mean, you've got your culture. You've got your society, you've got your culture, you've got your religious organizations, you've got your family structures, you've got your peer groups. These are all influences that are going to try to mold from their perspective what they want to see you become in terms of you walking down your lane. Now, they don't think of it that way, but that's what happens. Everybody in the world is trying to mold us. Everybody's trying to make us who they want us to be. Everybody's trying to control us to one extent or another, so that we fit in and we don't make a lot of noise. We don't like it when people make a lot of noise. I don't like it when I hear people make a lot of noise. So,
That's
and
because
I
that's
make a lot
happening
of
to you
noise.
right
I
now.
probably me. It's probably me. I'm projecting onto other people because I can make a lot of noise. But
Well,
it's all of those things are there. And of course, if we didn't think that there was something to astrology, that there was something that, in a way, astrologically genetic, if you want to, astrological DNA, if you want to think of it that way. If we didn't believe that, then why would we even be studying astrology? There'd be no sense in even studying it, because if there was nothing to it, then we should see nothing happen as an expression of it. But that's not what we see. That's why we all struggle with, Jesus, how does this thing work, or whatever? Are we actually viewing it right? And so, I mean, we all know that it works to some extent. It's always contextual, depending on all the things that we just discussed, and you as an astrologer.
okay, yeah, the astrologer informs the equation too. So a few things there. One is, I do think that the ancients, the Hellenists, would look at it as genetic. In fact, they called it Genesis. Like, there's nothing more genetic than your Genesis, right? And if we actually compare ourselves to genetic testers, where we'd say you have a genetic tendency towards violence, that's similar to saying your chart is violent, right? So I think that's actually more close to what we do than being a counselor, which everyone thinks we're like counselors. I'm like, well, a genetic scientist can do some counseling to get you through your genetic test, right, kind of thing. Yeah, but so there's that piece. I do agree that it's genetic, and or it's a genetic analysis. And then also the reason, okay, so I want to take your disagreement about the fatedness of the Moira, right? What ancient astrology, like they would call it apotalismatics, which is the study of all things about a thing manifesting into itself full on. And with the reason to study the chart in some ways was to say, what are these fates we're supposed to partake in? And then how can we mega manifest those fates? And so it's not so much how much are they fated or not, but how much can we extract from each degree in our chart? It was a mega manifestation approach to say, when instead of saying when a transit comes in, what's going to happen to me here, you say, what am I going to do with that transit? What am I going to do with this Mars going over my sun? What am I going to bake? What am I going to cook? So I think it's a little bit different than psychological astrology, which is a little more passive, whereas Hellenistic in its true form was really aggressive.
Well, I don't know about the passive. I mean, Noel was very, very big on prediction, and very, very big on, you know, seeing the weather, so to speak, in a very, very dramatic way. I mean, we have solar arcs, we have transits, we have secondary progressed moon. Um, we're not of the group of psychological astrologers who basically no longer do prediction because they have their various reasons for not doing so. No, I mean, I see, like I said, if I look at the weather and the weather's saying, damn, there's going to be a big storm up on that mountain. Am I sure I want to go over that mountain? And I can see it astrologically that it's a possibility. Maybe it's a Uranian Mars thing coming up or something like that. And I'm about to travel and I'm going like, I'm going to have to be really careful when I go in here because I have to watch out for sudden accidents and all, all the things that Uranian and Mars things have to bring out. Will it bring it out? Probably not. I mean, if I look statistically at all the people who have the same exact aspect as me at that time, how many of them actually wind up having accidents? Probably statistically no more than would it be expected under a normal bell curve. Nonetheless, if it happens to me and I'm an astrologer, I'm going to give that a certain significance. So I think I'm more like what you're talking about, where I will look at that. If I see Mars coming around and it moves quite fast around the chart, a couple of years, 2.5, and I see it, I'm going to be looking for what is it trying to stir up? What is it trying to energize? What is it trying to get moving in me? Okay, so I am going to look at it that way. When I see Saturn moving around the chart, I'm looking at the architecture of advance. I believe I have it's sort of a cycle of ambition, and I know what it's going, and it's going to go through its different phases. And there's summer, and there's spring, and there's summer, and there's fall, and there's winter, and there's a time when you should be doing something, and there's a time when you should not be necessarily doing something outward, but maybe work on yourself inward. Maybe get your mind in such a state that you can start to imagine yourself, visualizing yourself, seeing yourself achieving what that's going to be 14 years from now when Saturn hits your MC, as an example. So you have to learn to live within it. The cycles do have suggestions of something that's happening in your chart. Why is it happening? There's got to be a teleological reason. I just don't think it happens by accident. I think God has his hand in it, but on the other hand, he somehow says, okay, figure it out.
Yeah, the teleology
I think
really
we're
answers the.
probably more similar than dissimilar on this.
Well, who's winning, Jay-Z? Who's
Uh,
winning?
I think it's a tie so far.
Ah, it's a tie.
Oh,
I'm
you
gonna
know
have to
what,
be a little bit
Andrea?
more
You
savage.
win.
I've been being nice.
I don't even care about a tie. You win.
You win.
Well, we
I'll
both win because
let
we're
you win.
talking to each other.
I'm letting you win, and you know it. No, I'm just kidding. That is
Oh,
that
yes,
a way to take
I
away
know.
someone's win? I'm just kidding. It's not really a contest. But I
No,
do want to say that I think the teleological side asks that question, which is what is the purpose of this aspect in the chart? And I think does psychological astrology ask that question of like what is the purpose of the sun at 5 Cancer?
not necessarily at that degree level, unless you're, I mean, obviously some people are into degrees. I'm into degree from the standpoint of trying to figure out if one planet is dancing with another, then I want to know about it. I want to see how close or far apart they are. If it comes to a specific degree, like my ascendant is at 1 degree, 30 minutes Leo. Okay. Do I want to go and look at the degree measurements and then find out what people said about it, find out that I'm an Indian of something? No, not at that level. But if I know that Saturn is by transit is going to be coming across my ascendant, yeah, I want to know about that. And I'm going to be seeing the period moving up to it. I'm going to see the period that's going past. If I have a solar arc coming to, when it's within a degree, I'm going to keep my eyes on that because, well, actually, if it's to an angle, you already be knowing about it, especially if it's Pluto, Neptune, or Uranus or Saturn. You're going to already know it. You're going to be hearing the bells. They're going to be clanging as it moves closer to you to let you know, hey, something's about to happen. And what it is, it depends on the context of the life that you're living at the time, because it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same. You can have the same Saturn aspect 28 years later. It's not the same aspect.
Well, the
Everything's
rest of
different.
the planets are not the same.
And then that as well, but even the other one. So we have a tendency to look at these things as though they're sort of they become one thing and then they just kind of repeat. But it's not like that. It's that everything changed. Even in the universe, our whole universe is constantly in a swirl, and it's not the same universe as it was 100 years ago.
Well,
1,000
Jay-Z,
years
what's a
ago.
flywheel?
Oh, like when something supports itself, like the next thing, yeah.
So it's like it's spiraling upwards. Like
Yes.
your first Saturn return should actually be building you towards your second Saturn return from a teleological perspective of like you're always spiraling upward into a bigger manifestation.
Yeah, that's what we call it. We call it the spiral.
Oh,
Yeah. But I agree with you there. Like I said, you and I don't think we have as many differences because I have a lot of respect for traditional astrology now because everything that is psychological was built upon traditional.
Yeah, yeah.
So it already incorporates traditional. All we've done is hopefully we've said, you know what, human beings are not as restricted now, at least in the United States and Western Europe and places like that. We're not as restricted now as we used to be. We have more opportunities. And the planets that revealed that happened to come around from 1700, 1800, 1900. Okay. And then all of a sudden we saw all these new potentials. So we just factor that in because humans seem to be having more and more of talk about manifestation. You have the opportunity now of manifesting something in your life if you put yourself in the right lane, more so than you ever had it in the entire existence of the world going backwards. So you
Yes.
have to factor in these new things. And the next generation is going to factor more of the newer things that they're saying. I don't do anything with asteroids because, quite frankly, I have enough time just learning the 10 planets,
Yeah.
plus the angles and a few other things. But there's going to be something that comes out of that. I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Chiron, I look at it, but don't do much with it.
Same. Jay-Z, what's your question?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I understand like the teleological perspective is that we are here and what we're striving to do in a perfect life is to manifest the most of our potential and to grow into like the most beautiful, perfect version of who we can be. I guess what I don't understand, and maybe it's because I don't talk to you as much, is what is the kind of to that level of like explanation, uh, psychological astrology kind of stand for, or how does it differentiate?
Hmm. Um, I think we assume, okay, I assume, even though I was like, I always refer to Noel because I so closely aligned my thinking with his thinking. They just seem to match. So I think that God puts us on here for a purpose. And somehow the astrology helps us understand what part of that purpose is. And so if we can get in there and find out, and I'm not saying everything can be discovered in a chart. I don't think that's true neither. Okay. Um, I think we can learn to divine when we are on the right path for ourselves and not. Um, and there's lots of ways that our body will tell us that. And you're probably more knowledgeable about body stuff than I am because I tend to think through my brain
Mm.
more so than through my body. But I'm
Mm.
learning to be sensitive to more. So I think all you can do with the astrology is, you want to make something happen. You come to me, you say, you know what, I have this career opportunity. I'm thinking about doing this. Does this look like the time is right? Then we'll look at the measurements that are happening at that time and seeing if there's any potential obstacles. And if there are obstacles, are these designed to be obstacles so that you develop muscles as you go through them? Or are they, in fact, obstacles that are trying to block you from something because you really shouldn't be going that route? You should be going somewhere else.
Mm.
As an
So,
example, it's
so the difference kind of is that like you're here for a divine purpose, and the astrologer helps you decide, is this in fulfillment of my purpose? Less than, is this in fulfillment of my growth, like just for in the abstract?
no, I don't. I think in an ideal world, we would, and let's, this gets into the religious side of things though. If we weren't in an imperfect world, we probably wouldn't be doing things the way we do them now. We probably would have a direct connection with the man or woman, and we would, have conversations, and we would say we want to do this, and then you would kind of have some better guidance about things. But it doesn't work that way. So um, I think the best that astrology can do is kind of either reveal something to you that you didn't know was about yourself, and then but it registered to you when somebody astrologer says your chart suggests, and then you go, oh my God, you know what, that feels so right, and all, but they never seen it before. So that's one way, and then they take that, and then that becomes something, that a tool, mental, emotional, whatever. And then that tool becomes something that they use in order to move to another area. The reason I'm talking abstract is because every single person's different on this. We may have the same things that we want. We want a fantastic relationship with another person. We may want the perfect job, and we want to make a perfect amount of money with our job. We want to discover what our hobbies are so we can start, moving into those hobbies. We want to give something back to the world because the world gave us. And, we all have these common things over here, but within that commonality, there is billions of differences. And so
Yeah,
it's hard to,
and
yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
yeah, and I think in this manifestation theory of astrology, it's not true that we all necessarily want the same thing. Like, I feel like there's this, we've talked a lot about this, that people think there's this scarcity thing. Like, if I make a lot of money, then you can't make a lot of money. Like, I'm greedy because I made a lot of money. Well, according to, astrology, we each want a different thing. Like, I got that book, Think and Grow Rich, and I was reading it, and after chapter 2, I was like, I don't care about being rich. I'm going to change a name to Think and Grow Rich with Friends. And then I was like, I want 1 million friends. Like, I don't care about $1 million. But
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like, and so I do think that astrology would say, what is this person desiring to manifest versus this person? What are they desiring to manifest? And there's that whole idea of like, is there really free will? Well, are our thoughts free? According to the chart, we would say that our soul senses machine is built in a certain way, which our brain actually lives in the whole body, and how we sense things sends certain thoughts up to our vision center. A Scorpio senses a lot different stimuli than a Cancer does. A Cancer's like, "Are you okay?" And the Scorpio's like, "I like your shirt," right? Like, they're just different sensory apparatus sending different pictures, and so those two people want different things. And that's what the fatedness of this kind of a look is what will this chart want to express in some ways.
I'm sure that's, again, if we have the high opinion of a chart the way we do, there must be some of that to it. Has to be. Otherwise, we would all be knocking our heads and wasting our time, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So I think that's true. I think when somebody comes to see you, desire's already there. Just the only question you have to ask yourself, or they have to ask, is whatever the specific thing is they want. We do know from need theory that there's only so many general things that a person needs in a life. We do know that. So it's those are not billions of different things. Those are only a handful of things. But within that handful of things, the variations is in the billions or trillions, whatever that may be, because we're
need
all
theory.
we're so similar to each other, but yet that little teeny half of a fraction of a percentage is so different that it makes us all unique. So it's an amazing thing to contemplate sometimes. So
No, okay, well, can
there's
I
no perfect answer on this, Andrea. I mean, everything you said is correct, I think. And I think everything that we think about astrology is most likely correct.
well, it's
And
a
everything
technical
that we don't
philosophy.
know
I
is
mean, I
correct.
I don't think in philosophy you arrive at right or wrong. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's virtuous living, and how it's like there's in philosophy there's not you don't arrive that, and that's why it's so fun. Is like we get to keep wheeling around here. And everything you say is awesome too. Okay, let's change the subject. Okay, let's talk about remedies. So,
Mm.
astrological remediation. What does psychological astrology say about remediation?
The remediation that we generally would be looking at, and I caution this because I am not a trained psychologist, but we would be looking at those defenses that someone developed early in their life in order to protect themselves, and whether or not those defenses that they have, suppression, superiority complex, the need to be so independent that you don't need anybody else, so you chase other people away, and those kinds of things. Our remediation would come from the fact that we figure out where that pattern generated from, usually within 20 or 30 minutes. and then seeing whether or not it's still a problem, bring it to the attention, because often once a problem becomes, somebody becomes actually aware, they can see it, all of a sudden, oftentimes they look at it and go, why the hell am I doing that? And then all of a sudden the remediation occurred just by simple awareness. If it got into something much deeper, that's way beyond my pay grade. I would recommend they have to go see somebody. The other remediations are just simply trying to get people focused on to make a decision. How many times has someone come in and seen you and they go, I need you to tell me this, and then you look at them and you go, but you know, you've already made up your mind. When they came to see you, they already knew what they were going to do. They just were hoping that you would confirm what it is that they're going to do. In 99% of the cases, I've seen this. Okay. So oftentimes you don't really need to have remediation. I don't do crystals. I don't do fragrances. I don't do any of those kinds of things. I don't understand them. So I would never even attempt to do that. I think my remediation attempts to come through the mind, becoming aware, consciousness, discovering what they're trying to accomplish. Is there a viable path to help them get and see themselves? Back to what you were talking about earlier, but is there a viable path that they can see themselves getting to where they want to go, where they just told you that they want to go? Okay. And does the astrology support it? Like I said, like for example, what if someone comes to you and says, I want to meet the love of my life? Okay, but you're looking at a chart, and in the chart they have Neptune all over their ascendant, and they're in this one big cloud of confusion, and it's going to last for 2 or 3 years. Probably not the best time for them to go out to try to find the love of their life, as an example. Okay, you have to be able to tell them that. You don't necessarily say you won't find the love of your life, but you have to say that you're under a cloud, and the cloud's going to be here for a while. So how can we help you see through this cloud so that you can see things more clearly, so that you're not deceived, and so on and so forth? You know, it depends on the context of whatever the cluster of measurements are at that particular time, and what they're trying to accomplish. So
So the
I would,
remedy is largely psychological.
I think so. I truly believe that to the extent that you can become conscious, that you can take these things that have lived unconsciously in you and every now and then popped up. Okay. If you can take those things and then shine a spotlight on them and bring them out, oftentimes that becomes part of the cure. Jungian psychologists, that's the path they tend to go down. Psychosynthesis, which I studied under, and Marcella as well, we try to get people to learn how to sense what their true north is, if you will, what their true inner guide is, and then to align their decisions to that. Now, what that is going to be different each person, okay? So you can't necessarily derive that from an astrology chart. So you have to get a person to the point where they're able to look into themselves and be able to find that. But that's a whole series, that's a whole weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months of actually going through different techniques and stuff to do that. But that's another example. I don't, for me, I'm not Noel Till. Noel Till may have been able to get somebody there within 30 minutes or an hour. I don't even try to do that. I don't even try to estimate that my skill set is even close to what's necessary. I think if you need a professional, you go see a pro. You know, if you need an astrologer, come see me, especially if you're psychologically oriented. If you need to see somebody for something deeper, then I'm not the right person, and you need to go see somebody else. I mean, just the
So
way it is.
is this like your job is to help shine a light on what their predispositions are? If we're kind of circle back around to the top where we were talking about that, right? And then to help them come up with reframing of the interpretations that they have of things that happen in life in order to uh, act in ways that have better outcomes for them.
I think shine a light's a good way of looking at it, because oftentimes we just don't see what it is we're doing. We project it out onto somebody else, and we see somebody else doing it. Okay. So, but yeah, I think so. I think when you look at a chart, for example, I always start with trained this way. We start with a hemisphere emphasis. That gives us a cue about something. Then we go in and we look, we expect that the sun moon blend is going to be operating in this chart. If the sun, which is the center of your universe, is not sending out the light correctly, there's going to be a plumbing problem. There just is. So your job is, the way I was taught, is to find out where is the plumbing problem. Okay, what's getting in the way of, in this case, the plumbing sounds like water, but it means more than that. But your job is to get it, because if you don't figure out where the blockage is at, you're not going to be able to move forward, period. You're going to stop there every single time. You fate yourself that way, okay? Because you stick within a pattern and you stay within that pattern and you never leave that pattern. You've created a kind of fate for yourself. So from that standpoint, but yeah, I think so, Jay-Z. I think shining a light, trying to help people see where the blockages are, trying to help them become aware of what caused it, try to get them to the point where they can make a decision. Do I even need to worry about this anymore? Should I give it any more of my psychic energy? Now, I say that, and I don't want to make it sound like sometimes that's an easy thing to do. It's not. You got something Plutonian and it's deep. It's going to take some roto-rooter to get in there and bring that out, okay? That's some serious plumbing. You know, if it's a Uranian thing, it's probably waiting to bubble itself up. It's probably, that strike of lightning is coming out there somewhere. Neptune, it's a little bit more confusing because it tends to blur everything and makes it so that things are looked camouflaged, and you're looking at something and you're not necessarily seeing what you're looking at. Okay, that's Neptune. So it depends on what the thing is. But yes, essentially at its simplistic way, in a perfect world, that would be what you're trying to do. You're trying to shine light on what the charts suggest. And if you're really good, and at one time I was pretty good at this, you can even do a really good vocational profile and help a person find out what vocational profile they should have, using the skill sets that you just shined a light on. And you take all of those skill sets and you put them together and you say, what vocations would allow me to have all of these things operating, as an example.
Okay, so the Hellenistic side of remedy, I would say Hellenistic astrology is very lacking in remedy theory. It's very fate-based, and that's kind of one of the critiques of it is like Vedic Valens is like, this baby's gonna die, and like this is a slave driver, and like there's all this like fatedness to what they were doing there. But what they were looking at is what is the telos, what is the manifesting object here, and what Valens was really good at, and a lot of the Hellenistic astrologers was being really real about what is manifesting. Like they didn't sugarcoat stuff. They didn't say if Mars is rising in Aries conjunct the moon, they don't say this baby can be nice too. They would say this is a warrior and it will shoot you, you know. But they were really kind of in some ways lacking on the remedy theory, which is why my response to reading all those books was to write Astrological Remediation, because what I said was it's fine that this is our lit review shows us all this fatedness, but then we have to have a response to that. If we're going to look at charts in this real way, we have to say there's always a remedy, right? So I think, you know, Indian astrology has always been really good at remedies. Now, I know that's not part of our conversation today, but I do think it's
astrology.
What is it?
It's astrology. It's another variation.
That's true, but so I would say that if you are going to be a Hellenistic astrologer, what you really need to look at is the teleological side of things, which is the development theory side of Hellenistic, which says if something's developing, you know, a warrior's developing, and then there's a problem, like if the warrior starts punching its wife, for example, that's a domestic violence. We would say there's a problem with the warrior right now. We need to remedy that. So then we need to go in and do some harm reduction and fix the erroneous use of those fates, right? And then or those natural tendencies. We need to go in and fix those and help it to keep growing. And I think that's my take on teleological. That's not what's written in the ancient books, but we can be a neo-modern Hellenist and say a good use of Hellenistic astrology would be to really look hard at what those fates are, but then really remedy any problems that you get along the way.
Is
I
is
think
that
that's
a post-Hellenistic teleologist?
Whoa.
yeah. And the other thing to remember, though, about Hellenistic and all traditional astrology, like we started to go on before, was that remember, back then, your choices in your life as to what you could do were so daggone limited that if you were a blacksmith, your son was going to be a blacksmith and his son was going to be a blacksmith. If you were a servant in somebody's quarters and some rich person's house, you were going to do that. Then your daughter was probably going to do that, and so on and so forth. The maybe if you got into some of the really big European cities and stuff, maybe there was more opportunity. But back then, the choices were also much more limited than they are. So don't forget, if you're going to take this out and do the remedy, just make sure expand all of the potential opportunity that is now available, which will alter all of what those fates were, because those many of those fates were designed around very limiting prospects for a person in their life.
Hmm.
See, so you have a much more expansive world
Mhm.
than any of those. I mean, even people. I mean, when was the last time you heard somebody? Well, outside of political rhetoric, put that aside. When was the last time you met somebody who was in slavery in the U.S. as an example?
Hmm.
Now they may work as a servant, quote unquote, and make somebody's food. They may be a maid and go in there and clean somebody's house.
Mhm.
But most of them are in business for themselves now. So, it's
John,
a,
I'm bringing you on the culture and astrology show on Wednesday. I'm gonna book you for that because you're really good at that layer. That's good. Okay, I have
well,
another question for
it's
us.
the layer that I think through. Okay. I
Okay.
mean, in the same way that you think through, you've taken these concepts that make sense to you from the Hellenistic side, then you said, but we need to do this because if we don't do anything, we can't just leave people hanging. Okay, here you are this, now what? So you said, I need to do something. How can I help? So you went your path. So I do the same way, but it's totally through all the things that I have been
Well,
expressing.
I would love to have you
And
on that show because Ricky Williams, who does the show, is also a computer programmer. He's a Virgo rising, and you guys might have some fun talking about computers. Okay, I have another question. We have 10 minutes. Okay, essential dignity. How does psychological look at dignity of planets?
I think psychological, we pretty much just focus on the ruler of a planet. We Noel taught us, and I tend to agree with this, that there are no such things as good or bad. So we discarded those words from our language. Okay. And when you do that, you have to see things. Now, I have Mars in Libra. Okay. So I have an unfavorable Mars because my Mars is opposite from where it should have been. It was in rules Aries, so I have it in the opposite of it, as an example. I have Jupiter in Virgo. Oh my God. I have, what else do I have? I have three or four. Oh, I have Moon in Capricorn. Oh my God. I must be dead already, right? Okay. I mean, if you look at all of the traditional things, and everything's below the northern. I have nothing above the top. I mean, Jesus, how the hell did I externalize and meet anybody in the world? I mean, how did I do it? That type of thing. Um, I'm being a little facetious, sorry. But yeah, I think we tend to do it this way. So we look at the sign. That sign is ruled by a planet. We use modern day planets rulership. So Uranus with Aquarius, Neptune with Pisces, and Pluto with Scorpio. Okay, so we detached it Mars and said you're only getting half of this, and Venus, Jupiter, you're only getting Sagittarius. We're taking Pisces away from you, and we segregated it out. And so we do most of our work. We look at rulers, mostly rulers. We don't see a ruler as being good or bad. We just see a ruler as is. We're well aware that if Mars is most comfortable in Aries because it's allowed to just be itself, it can be free, it can be primal, it can be pioneering, it can do whatever the hell it wants when it's in Aries, provided the society agrees. Because if not, your ascendant's going to come along and it's going to censor your sun, your Mars in Aries, and your Mars in Aries is not going to do what it wants to do. I have Mars in Libra, so I have to try to kiss everybody's ass, excuse my Greek, in order to get my Mars to work. Okay. And I don't like
Thanks for
that.
kissing our asses, John.
Yeah.
And that's not my
Partnership.
natural
Because
instinct
we're
to do.
superior.
Uh,
Just
But you
kidding.
see what I'm saying? So, but we're well aware that a planet
Just
operates
kidding.
better in one sign than another.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we don't necessarily ascribe any negative language to it, so that that doesn't become part of the mind. Oh my God, my moon is horrible. My moon is so bad. On the other hand, I know damn well right that a moon in Capricorn going to have a mother relationship that probably didn't work out very well. I know that.
Yeah,
And
that
I may have been deprived when I was young of material stuff. And you would be right. I have both of those things as an example.
so this is where Hellenistic kind of is a little different than psychological. Like psychological really looks at the good in all things. Like it would say a moon in Capricorn is good for XYZ. It's good for having boundaries or being a principle. It wouldn't say it's deficient in these ways because part of psychological astrology is to build people up psychologically. And how we do that is to not tear them down by saying their moon is bad or their Mars is bad. What Hellas would say is that a planet in its own sign or dignified can produce what it promises. So is that good or bad? It depends philosophically how you look at it. Like Mars in Aries or Mars in Scorpio can produce what Mars promises, which is anger, fights, inflammation, bloodshed, like all these things. Like, is it necessarily good to have Mars in Aries? Not so much if you're trying to create a nice docile temperament. But is it good if you're on the football field? Absolutely. So I think,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and
Context.
and the moon in Cancer would produce what the moon promises, which is being emotional. And and moon in Capricorn isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't produce what the moon promises, which is all these like emotional layers. So I think from a teleological perspective of what is fated here, what it's manifesting here, it's really important to understand those dignities, to understand, is this a warrior? Is this a baker? Is this a mommy? What is growing here so that we can then use it for its purposes. So I think I'm not saying psychological is flimsy, and I'm not making any attacks here, but I'm saying that that Hellenistic is a lot more technical in its apparatus of looking at the fate and saying, no, that is a fighter chart, and no matter what way you look at it, we can't put niceties on and say like it's not going to fight because that chart is going to fight. Like it's got a temper. So I like the fatedness of Hellenistic in as much as it's real, and then we can go about remedying what's really going on here, as opposed to psychological, which in some ways I feel like is denying the apparatus that's built into the human. You know.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not denying. It's that when I'm teaching astrology, I always said Mars is always Mars. Mars is Mars is Mars is Mars. But once it puts on the clothing of Capricorn, it's going to be different. Once it puts on Cancer over there, Mars is going to try to be watery. This is why I don't really feel comfortable with Mars and Scorpio. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel right. Okay. But nonetheless, that's another side. So no, we still look at Mars is always going to be Mars. It's going to be easier in some places to be more like itself, which you're right. It's not a qualitative thing anyways. It's not, if Mars is a warrior and he's out on the soldier and he's a soldier and he has that impetus. Yeah, that's a really good thing. You want your soldiers to be more warlike most of the time, except for when you get to the part when, oh, you know what? We have to negotiate with them because we've already beat them. Now we got to do something good for them. So where's that Mars and Libra guy? Where's he at? Bring him over here and then put him over there to go and start doing the negotiation. So I still would not view it that way. I don't think we're weak on anything, quite frankly. I think I probably, if you feel we're weak, I didn't do a good enough job of explaining myself. Okay,
I'm
because
just
it's
being
not.
Sun Square Mars.
Yeah, no, it's a. I apologize for not living up to my potential.
Oh no, you did great. Are you kidding?
and my Mars in Scorpio is gonna make your Mars in
There you
Libra
go.
kiss my sexy ass.
Well, my Sun and Saturn and Mercury might have something to say about that in Scorpio, my friend.
Oh my God, it's a Scorpio scandal now. Okay, well, this is turning the Scorpio scandal show. Okay, well, okay, we're gonna have to wrap up there, John, but I'm sorry I keep having to have you on the show, but we still have like 15 things to talk about, so I don't know. It, the
Just let
secret
me
is I
know.
just
I'm
like you.
anytime. I enjoy it, Andrea.
Do
You
you?
and Jay-Z are good hosts.
Okay, well then I'm gonna email you. I really want you on the Culture and Astrology show, and I really would love to have a part two of this puppy because this is a really good topic. I think by delving into these, we really get going on astrology
And you
itself.
don't
So,
hear many people loosely talk about it, but when you realize that who you are has so been formed not just by your family and your peer, but by the society that you live in. I mean, even if you're on the extreme side and you hate the society that you live in, you've been influenced so much by the society that you hate. And those are on the other side who love the society we've been. It's the same thing. So those things help you become who you're going to be.
all right, well,
You
we're
know,
gonna have to clip it there, John. You're a perfectly loquacious guest. We love you. All right, JC, I look forward to dominating you later. All right, I'll see you later.
boy, have fun, Jay Z.
I meant just in everything, just not.
I know, I see.
All right.